Hello guys, our conversation today was inspired by two interviews which took place almost simultaneously, but one in Belgium and another one in Russia. During a conversation with a journalist, the Belgian Prime Minister said he believed Russia was invincible, that despite all the efforts, it cannot be defeated in Ukraine, and that's the main reason why his country fears giving up Russia's frozen assets. Another one took place in Russia. The Russian general Chirkin claimed that all this war is a total failure for the Russian Federation, that they were tricked by their own propaganda, underestimated the enemy, and now witness the consequences. I guess the Belgian Prime Minister does not speak Russian, but here you have me to translate the most important things from this part of the world for you to have a clear picture of what is happening in Ukraine, what is happening inside Russia, and only based on these facts build your presumptions and visions of the future, negotiations, peace, and so on. So let's discuss what Russian generals, captains now openly speak on various YouTube channels and television, and which aspects of the failed Russia's blitzkrieg they consider the most important, the most dangerous for the Kremlin regime. Because actually there are many. And each of such interviews, each of such analysis only demonstrates that Putin was and is very far away from the Russian reality and the global reality. You know that I am Anna, I am in Ukraine, and I'm always happy to tell you more about this part of the world because unfortunately there are too many experts who don't speak the languages, have never visited Eastern Europe, and know nothing about our history, politics, and so on. So you have me, subscribe, join our community, and please share these videos to spread the truth and real opinions of people who are in Ukraine. Honestly, I was very disappointed and quite surprised to hear the Belgian Prime Minister, seemingly well-educated man, saying that Russia is simply invincible. Just imagine if we keep appeasing Putin and in a couple of years he attacks the European Union because the intelligence proves he has such plans. How will that Belgian Prime Minister protect his country? Here again, we come to an important conclusion: NATO needs Ukraine, but we will focus on a different thing: how Ukraine systemically and effectively demilitarizes Russia. So I was very happy to watch one video of a Russian captain. I could not believe I can enjoy this kind of content, but there he decided to speak more about Russia's modern weapons. You know that Putin has this kind of kink that he constantly talks about the Russian weapons, missiles like Oreshnik, Burevestnik, Poseidon, and so on. And whenever he meets with people, teachers, children, and even wounded Russian war criminals in the hospitals, he keeps talking about these missiles as if they save the problems of these people. Just the country. They actually spend billions of dollars on the destruction of the Ukrainian kitchens and Ukrainian kindergartens instead of doing something to these miserable regions of the unnaturally large Russian Federation that definitely does not need any new territories. So that captain decided to dedicate his video specifically to Poseidon and Burevestnik. He says that these are Russian weapons that totally failed their mission, but Putin keeps speaking about them. So, for example, that Burevestnik was described as something extremely new, as a missile that does not have any other weapons in the world that can compete with it. And many wrongly associate that Poseidon, Burevestnik, Oreshniks, and other stuff with Putin. Many think that he was the father of these developments. And that captain says that, first of all of these developments literally failed because they spent millions, if not billions of dollars. And here, I need your attention, please. And 40 years on the development of these missiles, water weapons, and so on. Please remember, of course, Putin is the so-called leader of the Russian Federation for too long, like 25 years. That is the whole generation of Russians that were born and died somewhere in the mid-grinders while Putin is still that president. But it's not 40 years. It actually returns us back to the times of the USSR. So most of the weapons that Putin right now uses to boast or to threaten were actually developed back in times of the USSR when the Cold War was still a reality. Actually, it is now, because Putin wants to reconstruct the project of the USSR, thus the Cold War is back. And we need NATO that was developed, what? To keep Russians out and Americans in. I'm quoting the first secretary of that alliance, Lord Ismay, if I'm not mistaken. So that captain spoke about Burevestnik a lot, that this is an extremely big and very, very traceable, if that's the right word, missile that is really easy to detect and neutralize by air defense. And he says that Russia had a lot of other cheaper, already working missiles that Ukraine still managed to intercept. And that all this money spent and time spent on the development of Burevestnik did not cost a thing. Like, it did not bring anything. It did not change anything. Most importantly, you know that on Anna from Ukraine, my first main channel, I keep speaking about these Russian failures, and they have a lot when testing their missiles, like Oreshnik, like Sarmat. They constantly explode on the testing grounds or even on the platforms of the testing grounds, causing lots of problems for Russia. And in Ukraine, when talking about the threats from the Kremlin, many say that all that weapons that they use to blackmail us perhaps are in such a bad condition that they will literally explode still inside Russia, maybe exactly on the sides from which the Kremlin will try to launch them. So this critique was interesting, and that's what we feel. Because honestly, Putin's Oreshnik, Putin's Burevestnik, Sarmat, they only work as an instrument of blackmail and threat. They only work with Trump, not with an ordinary Ukrainian citizen. Like and subscribe if you want to demonstrate your solidarity. That's the easiest and extremely precious and important way for me. So what we see here is that many of these weapons developed, like all of these weapons developed back in times of the USSR, and I won't be surprised if they were developed in the Ukrainian Socialist Republic, because we've always been the brains of the USSR, and the maintenance of their nuclear weapons was performed by the Ukrainian specialists. So, you know, since 2014, all of their nuclear weapons are without the proper maintenance. But I did love an interview of General Chirkin, because there he spoke more about global problems inside the Russian army, inside the Russian government, because all of them totally misinterpreted the situation. He speaks that the Kremlin was not prepared for the long war. And we see that. The budget is not just empty, it's negative. As the Russian propagandists love saying, it has negative growth. They lack trillions and trillions and trillions of rubles, and they've started measuring everything in trillions. And he said one thing that is true, and that is somehow undermined by many who, speak about Russia, Ukraine, background for this war, and so on. Russian propaganda, their spies that were in Ukraine perhaps simply took money from the Kremlin and provided them the information Putin wanted. That's what happens in this authoritarian regime. So when I see how people, praise Trump and say that because of him there were no hurricanes in the United States, it may seem very unpleasant to watch. It may remind us about the North Korea television, but it also has negative consequences, not only for that society, but also for that leader himself. He believes that he managed to break people, he managed to break journalists, and now they say what he wants to hear. But they also deceive him, and he starts believing it even more. And then he makes mistakes, exactly as Putin did back in 2022 when he began his full-scale invasion, persuading his generals, persuading his people that in 3 days they will have all of Ukraine. This is not about territories. Please, someone tell Marco Rubio, this war is not about territories. It would be much easier if it was just about territories. Putin wants to conquer all of Ukraine, destroy Ukraine as an independent state, and then continue with the Baltics, with Moldova, with Poland, maybe with Romania, maybe with Bulgaria, and East Berlin was once Russian. So his intelligence, wanting to satisfy his mania, deceived him, and he believed them. And they constantly underestimate Ukrainians. And that Russian general Chirkin, I keep repeating his surname so that you can Google if you don't trust me. So that Chirkin said that we were informed that minimum, at least 70% of all Ukrainians are waiting for the Russians to come and liberate them. And then he says, it's not true. What we've realized that there are not even 7% of Ukrainians who were supportive of Russian tanks moving in the direction and changing something in the country. There were at least 7% of Ukrainians who might have considered reconstructing the USSR and joining Moscow again. And he said that was an extremely difficult and frightening revelation. Russia lost a lot of their soldiers and a lot of their military professionals in the very fast weeks because they were traveling on their tanks, convinced that Ukrainians would greet them with flowers. And we did, with flowers on their graves. They put their parade uniform on because they believed March in Kyiv would be possible. Don't let them trick you by saying, no, it's just about Donetsk, Luhansk. No. My city, Lutsk, is 80 kilometers away from the EU border, and it was bombed a number of times with missiles. Lots of people, not that many as in the east of Ukraine, but still were killed here. Why? Because Putin wants to destroy my country. And as long as some very primitive people keep talking about some territories, kilometers, they won't be able to achieve anything because they don't see the essence of this war. And I know why they don't understand it. Not only because they know very little about this part of the world, I don't know, they don't speak Russian, they didn't read a lot of Putin's speeches, but also because they cannot believe such absurdity is possible, such irrationality and violence is real. And here we return back to this fact that Putin is out of any connection with reality. He is crazy. Imagine how easier it would be to negotiate, to develop plans and strategies if finally more or less sane world leaders would have accepted that Putin is not okay, he is non-negotiable. Like and share if you agree, that's super important. And I feel very weird when I see smart people, leaders of really good countries that are our friends, and they keep pretending that Putin is normal. And when Trump wants others to worship him as some kind of ancient god, that's also okay. No. The more we pretend it's okay, the more problems accumulate and the more far away these people are from their reality. And the reality is that everyone in Ukraine, including grannies and small children, stood fiercely against the Russian invaders, and that helped us liberate the majority of the territories that they managed to take back in 2022. Please remember this. Russia killed 1 million of their soldiers to get a couple of settlements that they totally destroyed. That's nothing, no achievement. They did not manage to capture anything strategic. They had Kherson and then they lost Kherson. That was the only regional center that they managed to occupy back in 2022. And Donetsk and Luhansk were occupied by the Kremlin when no one in this world, including Ukraine, it was our mistake, but was not prepared to protect themselves. And Ukraine was once again advised not to escalate because people believe that by giving Putin Crimea, by giving Putin Donetsk and Luhansk, they could appease him. Don't you see, it doesn't work. He treats that as a green light and as an invitation. And the fact that he now speaks about the war with Europe is not just a sign, it's a plan. Trust me, I'm a Ukrainian that back in 2022 believed that the full-scale war was not possible. In the 21st century, in the center of Europe, with all this international attention, no. And that's exactly how you feel now in Lithuania, in Poland, or in Germany. And even if the Russian soldiers do not reach your Spain, the consequences of this big war, of the destroyed economy of the European Union, destroyed a connection, banking system, aviation, will have negative consequences. And why? Just because one man chosen by the population that does not know what democracy is keeps destroying our lives? Maybe it's the time to help Ukraine to do the job. Moreover, we are super motivated. I honestly do not know any other nation now, at least in Europe, prepared to fight that fiercely against Russia, and we're doing that effectively. If they are building a lot of missiles, then give us long-range missiles to destroy that arsenals and production sites. We can do the job. If we will keep destroying the oil industry, including their shadow tankers, we will destroy the war machine, the war budget. We are doing it not just for the sake of our survival, that's obvious, but also to protect the world. Because trust me, right now Ukraine is fighting against Iran, China, and Russia, against their plan to change the world order and not for our benefit. But Russia can be defeated, and they speak about that inside Russia, Russian generals and Russian captains. And then we have this Belgian prime minister that knows nothing, but just because he is a coward, he says such BS, inspiring Medvedev then to threaten more EU countries with strikes if their frozen assets are given to Ukraine. That's inevitable. Russia will collapse, and Putin triggered that process himself. Subscribe to witness the collapse of the Russian Federation and Putin in The Hague. That will be a very beautiful day, which I'm sure we will discuss on the channel. Also follow me on Anna from Ukraine, subscribe to my social media accounts that are in the description of this video, same as the link to our merch shop. There you can find a lot of beautiful and meaningful products that can become presents for this season and also turn you and your loved ones into the ambassadors of Ukraine, reminding the world about our fight and the need to defeat the evil. Thank you for buying me coffees, becoming my patrons and sponsors of the channel, but most importantly, thank you for standing with Ukraine. Slava Ukraini!